In ancient Greek theater, when the plot became too tangled for mortal resolution, actors playing gods would be lowered onto the stage by a crane called the Machina. They would arrive, declare the outcome, and the story would end. Not because the characters earned it, not because the narrative built to it, because a god descended and decided it was over. We call this Deus Ex Machina, God from the machine. And for 2,000 years, audiences have simultaneously recognized it as lazy storytelling and accepted it anyways. The question isn't why the writers use it. The question is, why do we keep letting them get away with it? Good evening. My name is Winston, and today from my library we are examining the Deus Ex Machina archetype. The Deus Ex Machina appears across every medium, every genre, every era. Frodo and Sam are about to die on Mount Doom when eagles, who have existed throughout the story but conveniently never helped before, swoop in and save them. Superman can't stop the missile from killing Lois Lane, so he flies around the Earth fast enough to reverse time itself. In Attack on Titan, when Aaron's about to be eaten, Armin is suddenly injected with Titan serum and transformed in a way that solves multiple problems at once. The Millennium Falcon arrives at the exact moment Luke needs saving, despite having no way of knowing where he is. The pattern is consistent. The protagonists are in possible situations, and then something external, something they didn't earn, didn't build toward, didn't control, resolves it for them. In Greek mythology, this was literally how stories ended. Medea murders her children and is about to face justice when her grandfather Helios sends a chariot pulled by dragons to whisk her away. The audience knew she deserved consequences. The playwright knew she deserved consequences, but a god intervened, and that was that. No more resolution, no character growth, just divine override. And the Lord of the Flies, the boys descended into savagery and murder, and just when it seems irreversible, a naval officer appears on the beach. The darkness is interrupted not by boys' growth or realization, but by the adult authority arriving from outside the narrative. William Golding himself later admitted it was a deliberate Deus Ex Machina, and he used it anyways.
Coom down now, Winston. You're telling me storytellers been writing themselves into corners for thousands of years, and then just drop a miracle solution out of the sky? And people clap for that. That's not storytelling, man. That's somebody realizing them lost control of the plot and pretending it was the plan all along, man.
Precisely. And yet it works, which raises the uncomfortable question, why? Here's the mechanism. Writers create stakes. They escalate tension. They corner their protagonists in situations with no apparent escape, and then they realize they've written themselves into a corner as well. The villain is too powerful. The timer is too short. The odds are too impossible. And there are only two options. Either admit the protagonist loses, or introduce something new that wasn't established. Most choose the latter, because audiences tolerate Deus Ex Machina more than they tolerate their heroes losing. In superhero comics, this is endemic. Batman is about to be killed, and then an ally who wasn't in the story before appears with exactly the tool needed to win. Spider-Man is overpowered, and then a villain's weapon malfunctions at the exact moment necessary. Superman is dying, and then he absorbs sunlight in a way that's never been established as working that quickly before. The CW's The Flash became notorious for this. Every season, Barry Allen faces a villain he can't defeat with his established powers, and every season, he suddenly runs faster than he's ever run before. Not because of training or growth, but because the plot requires it. I just have to run faster becomes a solution to every problem. It's Deus Ex Machina disguised as character determination. The mechanism isn't narrative necessity, it's creative exhaustion. The writer built a problem they couldn't solve within the established rules, so they changed the rules.
So basically the writer raised the stakes too high, realized them can't cash the check them wrote, and then invent a magic solution to bail everybody out. Winston, that's not clever writing, man. That's the narrative equivalent of flipping the board when you're losing the game.
Yes, but it's cheating audiences accept because the alternative, watching the hero fail, is less satisfying than watching the hero win through unconvincing means. We'd rather have a bad solution than no solution, and writers know this. Consider War of the Worlds. H.G. Wells wrote one of the most influential science fiction stories ever, depicting an unstoppable alien invasion. Humanity is powerless. Technology fails. Hope evaporates. And then the aliens die. Not because humanity fought them, not because someone discovered a weakness, because they caught Earth bacteria and their immune systems couldn't handle it. This is textbook Deus Ex Machina. The solution comes from something the protagonist had no control over and didn't contribute to. But it's brilliant because it's thematically coherent. The smallest, most overlooked aspect of Earth defeats the greatest threat. The mechanism is the same, but the execution makes it feel earned. And that's the key. Deus Ex Machina becomes acceptable when it's thematically justified, even if it's not narratively earned. But here's where it gets interesting, because audiences don't actually agree on what counts as Deus Ex Machina. The Eagles in Lord of the Rings are controversial. Some argue they're established in the world and therefore fair use. Others argue they're convenient plot devices that could have solved the problem earlier, but didn't, because the story needed to happen. Both are correct, which means Deus Ex Machina isn't just about what happens in the story, it's about what the audiences are willing to accept. And what they're willing to accept reveals something uncomfortable about what we actually want from stories. Here's what the audiences actually want. Resolution. Not necessarily earned resolution, not necessarily logical resolution, just resolution. The feeling that the story is over and the good guys won. And Deus Ex Machina provides that feeling efficiently. When the Millennium Falcon shows up to save Luke at the end of A New Hope, audiences don't care that Han had no way of knowing where Luke was, or the timing is impossibly convenient. They care that Luke isn't dead and that the Death Star is destroyed. The mechanics of how it happened are secondary to the emotional release of victory. In video games, this manifests as scripted saves. God of War has Kratos about to be killed in a cutscene, and then Atreus appears with a convenient power-up he didn't have before. Final Fantasy games feature the party defeated in battle, only for a previously unmentioned ally to arrive and revive them. You didn't earn it through gameplay. You couldn't have prevented it through skill, but the game needed you to survive, so it arranged for you to survive. And the players accept this because the alternative, a game over during a cutscene you can't control, feels worse. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry is saved from Dementors by a Patronus that turns out to be his own from the future. It's a time travel loop that solves the problem retroactively. Harry didn't develop new skills or overcome his limitations. He just discovered he was always going to survive because time travel said so.
So people would rather take a cheap victory than watch the hero lose honestly? Winston, that mean the audience part of the crime too. Them not just tolerating the God button, them cheering when somebody presses it.
Yes, and that preference shapes what gets written. Because if audiences punish stories where heroes lose more than stories where heroes win through Deus Ex Machina, then writers will keep pressing the God button. It's optimization, not artistry, but it's optimization that works. Look at how audiences defend these moments. At least the heroes survived. It was rushed, but I'm glad they won. It doesn't make sense, but it was satisfying. These aren't defenses of storytelling. These are admissions that logic was sacrificed for comfort, and audiences are fine with that trade. Because what we actually want from stories isn't challenge, it's reassurance. We want to know that no matter how bad it gets, the good guys will win. Even if they don't deserve to, even if the rules have to bend, even if a god has to descend from a machine and declare it so. Not all Deus Ex Machina is equal. There's a spectrum, and understanding it reveals what separates acceptable divine intervention from narrative collapse. At one end, in the Matrix Revolutions, Neo is dying. Trinity is dying. The machines are winning. And then Neo makes a deal with the machines off screen that solves everything. The audience doesn't see the negotiation. They don't understand the terms. They just see the problem disappear because Neo talked to someone. This is Deus Ex Machina at its worst, a solution that happened outside the narrative we've been watching. On the other end, The Lord of the Rings, Gollum bites off Frodo's finger and falls into Mount Doom, destroying the ring. Frodo failed. He couldn't destroy it himself, but Gollum's obsession, established throughout the entire story, becomes a mechanism of resolution. It's technically Deus Ex Machina because Frodo didn't succeed through his own will, but it's thematically earned because the corruption of the ring has been the driving force all along. The difference is setup and payoff. Deus Ex Machina works when the intervention was established, even if its role wasn't obvious. It fails when the intervention appears from nowhere. In Avengers Endgame, Captain Marvel arrived at the exact moment needed to destroy Thanos' ship. Some call this Deus Ex Machina. Others argue she was established earlier in the film, and her arrival was foreshadowed. The debate reveals the line is thin. Milliseconds of setup can transform a cheap save into an earned victory in the audience's perception.
So there's actually a right way to cheat? If you mention the god a little earlier in the story, suddenly it's good writing? Winston, the standards for storytelling getting mighty generous these days.
The bar is low, Toombs, and that's precisely the point. Audiences don't need much, they just need plausible deniability. The illusion that the solution was always possible, even if they didn't see it coming. And writers have learned to provide just enough setup to maintain that illusion. Here's the cost. When writers can press the God button, stakes become meaningless, because audiences learn that no matter how impossible the situation, a solution will appear. The timer will stop at 1 second, the cavalry will arrive. The protagonist will unlock a power they didn't know they had. And once you learn that, tension evaporates. You stop worrying about the characters because you know the story won't let them lose. Not really, not permanently. This is why death has lost meaning in certain genres. Characters die and return so frequently that death becomes a temporary inconvenience rather than a permanent consequence. Superman dies and returns. Goku dies and returns multiple times. In the MCU, characters are snapped out of existence and then snapped back. Death is a plot point, not an ending. And audiences have learned not to mourn because they know the God button will be pressed. The character will come back. The rules will change. The machine will descend. In Game of Thrones, the Night King, built up for 8 seasons as an unstoppable existential threat, is defeated in a single episode by Arya, appearing from nowhere and stabbing him. No strategy. No sacrifice from the protagonist we follow. Just a character with established stealth abilities, using those abilities in a way that the story hadn't earned. Millions of viewers recognized it as unsatisfying, but millions more defended it because the good guys won.
So all these convenient saves and miracle endings been training people not to believe anything bad will actually stick. Winston, that's not just storytelling anymore. That's teaching folks to wait around for the universe to fix the problem for them.
And that's precisely the lesson it teaches, that protagonists don't need to grow, learn, or change. They just need to survive long enough for the external forces to resolve their problems. Character agency becomes optional. Growth becomes unnecessary, because the story will save them even if they can't save themselves. This is why some of the most memorable stories are the ones that refuse to press the button. Breaking Bad doesn't save Walter White. Attack on Titan doesn't give Eren an easy way out. These moments respect their audiences enough to let the consequences happen. Because most stories do press the button. Most stories do let the God descend. Most stories prioritize comfort over integrity. And we let them, because the alternative, watching heroes fail despite their best efforts, is harder to accept than watching them succeed through narrative convenience. Deus Ex Machina isn't just a writing technique, it's a cultural agreement. We agree to accept convenient solutions because we don't actually want to see what happens when there are no solutions. We don't want stories that reflect reality, where sometimes you do everything right and still lose, where sometimes the cavalry doesn't arrive, when sometimes the machine stays in the sky and the God never descends. We want the machine, we want the God, we want the button pressed, and as long as we do, writers will keep pressing it. So here's my question. Think about the last story you loved that ended with a convenient save. That last minute arrival, the sudden power up, the miraculous survival. Did you criticize it, or did you feel relieved? Because if you felt relieved, you're the reason the God button exists. And the question is, are you comfortable with that?
For what it's worth, Winston, me think people just tired of bad endings in real life. So when them watch a story, them want somebody to win, even if the victory made no sense. But that's just mere observation from beyond the grave.